Some of it is just sort of like a manual. It's pretty boring, and probably not of interest to the public. But there are parts that very meticulously give you a list of every single level of the priesthood and deacons, priests, bishops, and then other titles of authority. And each one had different color cassocks, and they had different color gloves, and they had certain color of gems that they wore. So there's all this kind of symbolism in the.
There's also, I'm not sure if they call it that, but I guess, you know, what approximates for the rest of the members, not just the clergy, but degrees.
Degrees, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very Masonic in that way.
Yeah.
Donald, I'd really just like to say thanks. I mean, if most of my understanding of Dr. Fabre-Palaprat's come from reading 8th generation Mumbo Jumbo, I suppose, really, in reflection.
Well, the Masonic source is English, and they were working off of hearsay.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're interested in Mumbo Jumbo, the original Mumbo Jumbo, there are actually, and that's the ironic thing, is that the cranky old Catholic marquise is actually pretty accurate. She doesn't. I mean, there's this long portion before that I did not read to you about her understanding of all this. But I mean, keep in mind that the marquise that we're talking about, Vicky, she in her memoirs, other than Dr. Fabre-Palaprat, there are a lot of other very interesting people. The Count of Saint Germain, of course. Cagliostro, of course. She was actually the cousin of Louis, the Cardinal de Rohan, who was the Prince Bishop of Strasbourg. And he was, I don't know, for those of you who are interested in this kind of stuff, he was the host of Cagliostro. And the Prince Bishops of Strasbourg are important to the 2010 version of this, because I was living right across the street from where Cagliostro used to live when he was there. So right across, right near the cathedral chapter house and the palace of the Rohan bishops. Because in some places in the empire, in the German Empire, remember that Strasbourg was German before, the prince bishops would be electors of the emperor, and they had pretty much free reign. It was a free state, basically. They had their own laws and traditions. So he was not only the highest ranking civilian or administrator of it as the prince bishop, he's of course also the head cleric and usually a cardinal. So they're very powerful people. And it's really interesting to see anyway, they're cousins. That is the cousin of this lady. And so she relates that she saw some rather detailed explanation of documents that were crossed between Cagliostro and the Prince Archbishop, her cousin. And she says that, I don't know, are you interested in this?
Sure.
Yes.
This is a quote, the Grand Master of the Templars, this is how it starts, the passage about Fabre-Palaprat. The Grand Master of the Templars, Jacques de Bourg-Molay, who was tortured to death in 1314 and whose family survives to this day in Nineveh, had created during the captivity in the Bastille 4 mother lodges: the east, Naples; for the west, Edinburgh; for the north, Stockholm; and Paris for the middle. The day following the execution of the Templars in Paris, Sir Nicholas of Aumont, that's A-U-M-O-N-T, and 7 other Templars disguised as stonemasons came to collect the ashes of their brothers. 15 days later, Sir Erskine de Florio, who had denounced the order, was murdered in the Place d'Avignon. Pope Clement V had done him a magnificent funeral and declared him, quote, a venerable servant of God, unquote. But it appears certain that the Templars removed his body and deposited it in the tomb of Jacques de Molay. Then the 4 lodges founded by him began to organize themselves, and all the Templars took an oath to destroy the power of the Pope, to exterminate the Capetian dynasty and all monarchs, to excite the peoples to revolt, and to establish a universal republic. Madame de Créqui basically, she's obviously not a huge fan of the French Revolution, and this was written after. It's likely that this was written after, or she might have kept note. Personally, I think there's some controversy about her memoirs because they're so big. It's impossible for one woman probably to have written the whole thing by herself. But she probably wrote in a diary, and then later, maybe even after she died, her nephew or her son, or both, transcribed everything into the books and had it published to make money. Because it was juicy stuff. I mean, it would have been boudoir reading. So that's her context. So it's very lengthy.
Mm.
So and the connection to the Templars is unquestioned. That's the funny thing, is that she's not particularly favorable to us, and yet the connection to the Templars is there, and she states it as fact. Now, she could be doing the same thing that a lot of other people do, which is repeating errors that she heard from someone else. But I find her of a lot of other, I'm a big primary resource kind of guy. And so you want to find someone who's actually living and an adult and literate. So that's 3. And who has the means to know, she's definitely got that, and who actually has some first-hand accounts, which she also has. A lot of it is hearsay, but some of it is her own reflections. And you can tell that that she has very detailed information about these things. So if she sees a letter that her cousin exchanged, maybe she goes to Strasbourg and she visits her cousin, and they're talking about politics or whatever, which in the salon that he would have kept. And it was a very liberal place. The Palace of the Rohan in Strasbourg is now the museum, and it's a perfect piece of neoclassical architecture, not a Christian symbol in sight. In fact, over every arched window is another classical god, and it's a beautiful building, and it's very prominent in the city, and it's right next to the cathedral. So she would have been in the center of things, visiting her cousin, and would have seen and been, close enough to him for her to have actually seen those letters, which is where she gets this idea from. Now, was Cagliostro just feeding a line of garbage to confuse people? It's quite probable, but you never know. It could be, frank. I mean, he couldn't have been too misleading to his patron, because he was being kept by him. Literally, the house across the street from where I used to stay and from my office, the whole house was Cagliostro's. And it was just sort of like, oh, the Prince Bishop says you can have this house. And with the caveat that if you piss off the Prince Bishop, not only will you die, but you won't have a place to stay.
Things might go badly.
Yeah, very badly.
Earlier you said that you had some theories about what happened to the original vellum. Can you share those here? Speculative ones?
We know that by the 1850s, isn't it? Sir, when there's the big brouhaha in the church.
There's a couple by 1870, the order dormant, and I can't remember if it was during Palaprat.
What was the Englishman's name, I guess? You know.
Or which, at which point, sorry?
That fabre-palaprat wanted to be the last leader.
You know, I can't remember. I do know that the admiral.
Yes,
Yeah.
the admiral.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he ended up becoming the regent, and that there was a split, or there was a dispute over the prominence or role that the Johannite Church would play in regards to the order, because there was a group that was very devoted Catholic.
Right, right.
And so you have, interesting enough, because Bishop Tim and I were just talking about this not too long ago, but
Bless you.
I'm just trying to think of the demise of the church at that time versus the demise of the order, but it all happens. I mean, Palaprat passes on in 1838, if I remember right, and I think things were already heated at that point in his time, but I think that kind of goes
Yeah.
shortly after, but the order continued.
Yeah. So, long story short, my speculation is that because the order was always the strongest one, obviously, and for obvious reasons. You know, I mean, it's older. It might be older than that, really. And so, when push comes to shove and things happen, they tend to have. First of all, there was no distinction because you were keeping all this stuff together, probably. So I think that if that's the case, and it was the order was the last thing to go dormant, that it would have been turned over. It might have been turned over to the Grand Orient de France. I personally believe that a lot of this is in the archives of the Grand Orient de France. But try getting it.
As I say, there's a lot to suggest that, elements of the church, obviously, just like the legend suggests from earlier times, would be carried within the order, because I mean, if you read if you read the manual for the order, which is available in English, when it's been kicked around, I mean, there's a lot of crossing in the fleet.
But I have another theory,
Yeah.
which is that there's this little bookshop in Toledo, and there are these two brothers. And if you get up on a ladder and look on top,
Single leaf.
yeah, I don't. So, but that's my best guess. I hope that's where it is. I hope it's not been destroyed or left, or that it was used as somebody's coffee table.
Someone's mother used it as kindling to light a fire at the kitchen stove.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Lined pie plants, pie.
Yeah. And I personally think that it would be worth sending in, spending some time to try to, as they say in French, the direct translation is to lubricate the social relations.
Yeah, because it's not impossible to get to that archive, right?
I'm sorry?
It's not impossible to get to that archive.
Not at all. It's not impossible. Not at all. It's just that I was in Strasbourg, not in Paris. And at the time I was translating, not really interested in seeing the original. But yes, I mean, it's just like any other Grand Lodge. I'm sure that you can get in. They might have restricted stacks. Being in France, usually everything is restricted. They just automatically assume that you're nefarious and that you will, vomit on their books. So, you need to get permission and you need to fill out a form. But Yeah, I mean, even the secret archive, the Apostolic archives at the Vatican, you know, you just fill out a form. Because for those of us who went to school in Europe, you're used to that. There are no, you know, non-restricted stacks in a lot of libraries. You have to just fill out a form and give it to this woman who looks like she's going to eat your soul. And then she'll go get it for you. That's why I married an archivist.
We're much friendlier.
Yeah, Brandeis is a lot friendlier, yeah.
I don't know, Maggie, if you put that hair up in a bun,
Yeah.
who knows what could happen.
Yeah, the trick is just to look like you're going to eat somebody's soul.
Right.
That's all that's necessary.
Well, in the US, there's all this stuff about, you know, encouraging people to come in.
No,
So,
weird.
you know.
I don't hold with it.
I don't hold with this modern heresy.
Not to lower the quality of discourse like I did yesterday with Grace's lecture, but I was wondering if you could quickly, I'm sure that's a whole other lecture, if you could quickly run through the major punctum about the Levitikon. Like, what are the main points that are wrong that if I Googled it would pop up?
Where's the mumbo jumbo?
What's the major mumbo jumbo that's completely wrong?
Well, it's not completely wrong, like any good lie. It's based in truth. For example, Jesus went to Egypt and was initiated, as we say, but it goes much further. It says, an initiated of Osiris, and it's very specific that he's basically bringing this. And what I'm saying is, I translated the document, the gospel that supposedly contained this information. And it does say, there is a question that Father Anthony is going to talk about later. But basically, they ask in the Gospel of John, in all the versions of the Gospel of John, but in this version, they're very specific. In the regular Gospel, it asks him, "Are you not the son of Joseph and Mary? Aren't you one of us?" And in here it says, "And what is this learning from the Greeks or from the Egyptians?" Now, I was just talking about this with Maggie this morning, as you do. It is quite possible, and you don't have to be, a sort of moon-gazing weirdo to look in the Bible and see that Jesus and Mary, it's called the flight into Egypt, right? And then there's nothing. So, big deal. Yeah, maybe he did, and it's obvious that he is able to communicate in an intelligent way. Well, he's able to piss off a lot of people, right? Very, very important people. So if you were just some troll from the dung heap and only spoke Aramaic, I doubt very much that they would even give you the time of day. Really. So, is it true? Yeah, but it's even true in the canonical Gospel of John. You can read in that. You can definitely read in that passage that he's bringing some, as Monsignor Stratford said, some alien knowledge, something that's not part of the usual, Jewish religion that's prevalent. So that's one of the things. It basically states that he is a priest of Osiris, and
I think where that workup might be coming from is you have the implication that there's other learning or other education coming in the one line, out of the primitive Gospels, but then you have the Catechism and the rest of the book.
Yeah.
That's built up around it, where they turn around and they kind of stretch that out a bit and hang it, kind of thing. And so, you're having people kind of look at the commentary, for the community around Palaprat and kind of read that into what's, or to kind of, push that back in there. But that kind of specificity as submitting religion, any more copy, is not actually enough.
Right.
If,
Yes.
yeah.
And you heard it in the first quote that I read, by fabre-palaprat, who says, basically saying, the sanctity of our religion is not based on this document. He says it explicitly. And it's not just him, actually, that he signed it, and it was also signed by Movia, the bishop, the other bishop. So they're making a statement. That's a really important statement, and I can't emphasize that enough. You know, this is like, please stop distributing the same infograph over and over and over again. That's wrong. Yeah, you know,
I liken it to a game of telephone. I know it's called different things in different countries, but you know, where one person whispers in the ear of the next person, who whispers in the ear of the next person, and the mumbo jumbo comes out the other end. The bit about that all of the miracles are excised in Levitikon, right? That's one that you hear, and they're not.
they're not, yeah.
But things are excised, and so
They're reduced.
yeah.
I think
Well,
that
we'll
we
talk
should
about it.
transition into the,
Yes.
take a break and transition.
As a quick, interesting point, talking about the telephone game and things that get repeated, this is one of those kind of anniversary stories that kind of connects after a fashion. As everybody knows who's been in formation, you start off with a review of the sacraments, kind of bring you up to speed. To bring you up to speed if you're not familiar with them, or to kind of refresh your brain if you come out of the sacramental thing. And so, you know, typically, you know, not a lot of seminarians will turn around and put their papers online once they're done, you know, good or bad. And, you know, especially if there's some mistakes. But there's a well-known priest in our church who you know, essentially made a blog post about his sacramental views way back in the beginning as he was going through formation. And there's a significant error in there, which has been copied by 2/3 of people who have gone through our program because they've read that post and they've copied that answer, you know, in almost the exact same way. And so I know where the source of the error is coming. I know where the source of the error is coming from, and they repeat it throughout the thing, because in that opening thing, Father Donald is not one of the people, by the way, I should mention. You know, but
Publish a list of those people who did.
yeah, it is literally one of the most oft found mistakes in that course.
So what you're saying is, if you're going to put your answer to the, if you're going to put your seminary paper online, at least have the decency to put an Easter egg in it, so that we can tell who's copied it.
Right. I actually, you know, enjoy pointing out, but I know where you got that.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, that goes back to Father Bonani. We implant things that are wrong just so we know who's talking about it.
Thank you, Bill.